Yeah, so I don't have that. Wait, no, you. I have extras if you misplaced it.
I was getting my teeth.
Okay, there is a second paragraph. It starts, in this novel, Jay Gatsby represents. You're going to correct that second paragraph. So you're looking for commas and capitalizations. And it still uses the same rules that we talked about last time. Yeah, second paragraph. Okay, there are 2 commas in that. And 5 capitalizations. Okay, how many of you guys found 2 commas? Raise your hand if you have 2. How many of you found 5 capitalizations? Awesome. Okay, I wanted you to check in with the person next to you and make sure you have the exact same corrections. You can grab your phone on your way. Worked out. Okay, let's check in here. So obviously we need to capitalize Jay Gatsby's name, we need to capitalize America, we need to capitalize the words at the beginning of sentences, right? Those are all our capitalizations. Did anyone get any of the capitalizations wrong at this point? Oh, I guess I shouldn't ask that. I should say, how many of you got the capitalizations right? Hooray, most everyone. Anyway. Okay, so hopefully you're getting those right at this point. There are only 2 commas in this. I'll tell you a couple of places that people might put commas that would be incorrect. Some people might put a comma after a novel. That prepositional phrase is so short that you don't need a comma after novel.
There's not a comma?
No.
That was the most sure of.
Okay.
Yeah, me too.
So that doesn't fit in with any of the 3 rules that I've given you so far, right? So there's no comma after that. Some people might put a comma after the word harm because they feel like there are 2 things that he represents. And so this creates a kind of list of things. But remember, you don't want to separate the subject from his actions. So Gatsby represents both harm, or I guess this time subject from the objects. Gatsby represents both harm and benefits, and we don't want to divide those up then. Someone might put a comma after wildly because he's a wildly successful capitalist, but can you put the word and there? Is he wildly and successful capitalist? No, it's because because wildly is actually an adverb that is describing successful. He's not a wild capitalist, he's a widely successful capitalist. I meant to put wildly there. Whatever.
Oh, I didn't even notice.
Yeah. And then he's also an untrustworthy corrupt bootlegger, right? Can we put an and between untrustworthy and corrupt? Yeah, he's both an untrustworthy bootlegger and he's also a corrupt bootlegger. So we need a comma in between untrustworthy and corrupt. All right, wealthy people in his community do not have respect for him because he was not born wealthy. We're going to talk about dependent marker words today because it's one of those, so we don't need a comma there, and I will get to that here in a second. But we absolutely need a comma after wealthy. Why do we need a comma there? Can someone explain to me why we need a comma after wealthy?
It's like separating two different things.
It's separating two independent clauses, and that's what's key here. Some people here are putting more commas than they need because they think they need to separate the qualities that Gatsby has. But what you need to actually separate is independent clauses. And what does an independent clause have to be considered a clause? Do you remember this?
Fanboys.
It doesn't need a fan voice, actually. It was just so confident. It's a subject and a verb for an independent clause. So I run, she jumps. Those are independent clauses because they have subjects and verbs. If you don't have a subject, it is not an independent clause. It doesn't use that same punctuation. And then fanboy separates the two, right? And right here you see the word but, and that's a fanboy, and so you need a comma to go with it. Yeah.
I thought it was words on five because you're not supposed to be.
You are supposed to. Yeah. That's the rule that we went over last time, and there's a video about it. So it's on Canvas. It says commas.
If I said like Cooper and I wouldn't put Cooper,
No, you wouldn't, because that's one subject. Cooper and I ate mac and cheese.
and you wouldn't put and after the end.
You would not put a comma there because this is a compound subject, right? But if you and Cooper ate mac and cheese and Sally ate carrots, she's much healthier than you, then now we've gotten into our second subject, doing a second thing, and you need a comma to separate those independent clauses. Yeah, Tiana?
You ever put a comma before because?
There are rare instances where it will change the meaning of the sentence if you don't have a comma before it, but like 98% of the time, no. Yeah. Okay, any questions so far then about that second paragraph? All right, let's add to our comma rules then. 3 more rules. Go back to the first page. Okay, let's get into those because ideas. So a subject and a verb is an independent clause. That on its own is a simple sentence. I run. That is a complete sentence, but it's very simple, right? There's compound sentences where you have 2 or more independent clauses. So that's the one like I had up there on the board where it was like Cooper and I ate mac and cheese and Sally ate this other thing. You're combining 2 things together into one sentence. And that's when you use those fanboys words, right? But when you're using, but a complex sentence is something different. A complex sentence is 1 independent clause plus at least one dependent clause. And a dependent clause is still a clause. It still has a subject and a verb, but you have added what's called a dependent marker word that makes that clause not stand on its own anymore. So something like, because I smell bad, no one likes me. What a terrible, why is that what came into my head? Or let's do, No one likes me because I smell bad. A word like because makes it so that this sentence would not be complete if I didn't have the second clause, right? If I just said because I smell bad, there's no, like, your reader wants something else from that. It's like, because what, right? Like, you have to finish that idea. So this is a dependent marker word. There are others like while or whether or I gotta Google it. I usually have a big long list of these and now I've forgotten. Yeah.
What if it's like, this is kind of like English now.
Yeah.
What if that's an answer?
Well, if you're just speaking it out loud, then you don't really have to care about whether it's a complete sentence or not, you know? But if it's an answer in your writing, it's still not a complete sentence. You would put the two things together. Yeah. After, although.
Henceforth?
I don't think henceforth this one because I think that one would be okay on its own, actually. Until. Whether, I already got that one, et cetera, et cetera. There's a bunch of these and you can hear it because you've been speaking English so long. You can hear that you want more after it. After I went home, after you went, if your reader wants to say to you, after you went home, what? Then you know that you've used a dependent marker word. And what makes these fun is that you punctuate them different depending on if they're at the beginning or the end of the sentence. So the rule for this one is, after you use a comma, so write this down under the fourth rule. After a dependent clause that starts a sentence. You might have learned this as an introductory phrase, but introductory phrases are a little more complicated than that. So the real rule is after a dependent clause that starts the sentence. So if a complex sentence can be one independent clause and one dependent clause, it can also be flipped. And it can be the dependent clause first and then the independent clause. So in this one, we've got the independent clause first. No one, verb one, so this is subject one, verb one. No one likes. And then this is just the object. No one likes me. Because I smell bad. Here you've got your subject two and your verb two, but you've got a dependent marker word right there. That means that this one doesn't stand on its own. So you do not need a comma. This one, because I smell bad, no one likes me, you've started with your dependent clause, and then you go into your independent clause, and so you need a comma between the two. So like, I went to the store while my husband slept in. There's my dependent marker word. I've got two clauses, subject one, verb one, subject two, verb two. But I use that dependent clause and I went independent, dependent, so I don't need a comma. But if I were to flip those and say, while my husband slept in, I went to the store, I'm going to need that comma there because I've started with the dependent clause. Okay, how are we doing so far? Okay, got it. All right, then let's do the next one. Okay, the next rule is to set apart. Here, write down the rule, and then I'll explain what it all is. I'm gonna erase. All right, rule number 2. This is 5, rule number 5. To set apart non-essential info, positives, exclamations, or interruptions. So all of that is to say this is info that is not needed to understand the meaning of the sentence. All right, so let's start with essential info versus non-essential, unessential info. Non-essential is the word. Okay, so let's say, women who are pro-life protested at the clinic. Okay, if we have it this way, we are saying that information right here is essential to understanding the meaning of the sentence. It was the women who were pro-life that were protesting at the clinic. I think pro-life would have a typo. It's them that were protesting at the clinic, right? But if you were to say this, and you were to set it aside with commas and say the women who are pro-life protested at the clinic, it's like I am saying that who are pro-life stuff is not essential to the meaning of that sentence, that we could understand the sentence without it. And basically what you're implying then is that all women are pro-life. That makes sense. If you were to just get rid of that, you said the women protested at the clinic and you're suggesting that this is implied, then you would be saying that this is just extra information. And you can do this with names too. So that's the non-essential info. Actually, let's do one with that and which. Sometimes the ACT will ask you whether or not you would use that or which. That is essential and which is non-essential. The car that went 95 miles per hour crashed versus the car which went 95 miles per hour crashed. Okay. If I use the word that, it means that this is essential information. It's probably like there are like 3 cars. One's going 95, one's going 70, and one's going 65. And you need to point out that it's the car that went 95 that crashed. You don't want commas in that one because you're saying that this is essential info. But if you went down here, if you're using which, you're saying the car, extra information, it goes 95 miles per hour, and it crashed. That's the important info. So I'm setting it aside with the commas. Are you with me so far? Any questions so far? Okay, cool. So that's the non-essential versus essential. Appositives are that same thing, but with naming. So it is when you are renaming something. If you were to say, okay, so an appositive is when you are giving extra information about a name. You're renaming it, basically. So you're saying, like, my mom, Lynette, I was going to lie and say she was a great cook, but she's not a very good cook. We love her anyway. She has other talents. My mom, Lynette, is not a very good cook. I don't need to really, that information that her name is Lynette is extra to that sentence. It's not essential, so it still goes by that rule, but it's also called a positive, where you're just renaming what you just said before. So right here, my friend Carlos came over for dinner versus my friend Carlos came over for dinner. What's kind of sad about this second sentence? Yes, which tells us that I've only got one friend.
Oh.
Right? Because you're basically saying, like, my friend, if I were to say my friend came over for dinner and everyone knows that that friend is Carlos, if you said my friend, it means you only have the one friend, so you don't really need to rename it, right? This is just extra information. Up here, if you say my friend Carlos came over for dinner, you're basically saying I've got lots of friends and it's important that you know that it was Carlos that came for dinner. So every time you're trying to decide whether you're setting aside things with commas, you have to decide, is that going to be essential for understanding the meaning of this sentence? Exclamations and interruptions are things like, wow, or yes, I hate him, or yikes, that looks terrible, etc. You set those interruptions aside with the comma. Okay, last rule. Which one should I use? Black for this one. This is rule number 6. You use a comma after long introductory phrases. In the morning, I'm making waffles. I've got a long introductory phrase there, or I've got an introductory phrase there, in the morning. It's telling when that is actually happening until it's before I get to my actual clause, right? I should say making. But it's short. It's only 3 words. The rule is if your introductory clause is 4 words or longer, 5 words or longer. Oh no, I just forgot. Introductory clause length. Boo-doo-doo. Sorry. 4 words or longer. Okay. If the introductory clause is 4 words or longer, you use a comma. So in the beautiful morning, a stupid sentence, but I'm making waffles, then you would use the comma. But it really only needs to happen if it's a long introductory clause. The reason this is important for the ACT is sometimes they'll try and throw you. They won't ask you specifically about this, but they will try and throw you with a question. And one will look like this, and it won't have the comma, but the rest will be correct. And students will say, oh, that can't be it because it's an introductory clause, so it has to have a comma, but it doesn't. And that's why we got to go over that one. Okay, any questions so far? Awesome, then I'm going to have you correct the 3rd paragraph now. This is the one that starts, my husband Scott and I bought a house. I will do it too. Oh, there's an apostrophe in there too, because I used to do apostrophes before commas. You could use parentheses if you wanted to. If you're like, oh, that is way too much of a aside to really work with commas. As long as you use it consistently. So if you're going to use one parenthesis, you have to close the parenthesis. Same if you use one comma, you got to close the comma. Oh, I missed one. 2. There's 8 commas in that.
The coincidentally part, yeah, it's all like extra. It's like I went on a little tangent and tried to tell people, oh, and coincidentally, there are people from the local hip hop community. Do you want to set them aside with commas so that you can't? Yeah, it's like it's terribly written, right? And I'm kind of trying to do it on purpose. But it would be like this. Oh, or like Isaac was like, I want to put parentheses there, and parentheses might work better. Yeah. Did you find the apostrophe? Are you ahead of the game on apostrophes?
I don't know.
Like, it's like the little. Wait, are you serious?
It's
I
the
know.
comma,
It's like. One of those.
Oh, that one.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's an
yeah.
apostrophe.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay,
hey,
now
you
you
see.
Yeah, I did. Okay, I am just going to tell you where these commas are, and if you got anything wrong, I want you to circle it big so that we can return to that rule next time, but I want to move on. So, there is a comma after days in the second sentence. There is a comma after, so you go down, this couple, comma, coincidentally, people Scott knew from the local hip hop community, comma. So I set that information aside. It is kind of clunky and badly written, and if this was student work, I would say, go back and rewrite that again so it's clearer. But, and I don't mean this as an insult, but some of your writing is a little clunky, and so if you can punctuate it at least correctly, then someone can still get the meaning, even if it's, you know, maybe not the very best written, it'll still be grammatically correct. So, comma after offer, apostrophe in the couple's decision, because they own the decision. We'll get to that later. Comma after minor, comma after unnecessary, comma after again, and comma after small.
Let's go. 100.
Excellent, good job. Okay, what do you need? Do you need to repeat any? All right, if you got one wrong, you're circling it big so that I can tell what we need to kind of revisit there. All right, then let's move on past commas, put those away for now. And we're going to finish your board games. So who was not here last time? Anyone? Wonderful, consistency. So you're gonna get back together with your group. I've got your boards up here. I'm gonna put them on the ground so they don't interfere. All right, so we've got your boards up here, and then I've got all of your pieces up here. We've got these question mark cards, all the game of life cards. So come up and grab all your stuff that you need, and I'll get out of your way. And you can move your desks again. Okay, I'm gonna give you 30 seconds to get back with your groups and get all your game stuff. There we go. Time limits.